When I read my parents' will and saw they left everything to our cousin, the one they always praised. I read the will in silence. The lawyer's voice was steady, clinical, detached. My name came once, followed by the phrase, "Nothing allocated." Everything, every house, every account, every bond, handed over to Brandon, my cousin, the one they always called their real son. I didn't flinch. Didn't cry. Didn't speak. I just sat there in that mahogany-paneled office in downtown Chicago, the weight of 32 years collapsing into one moment of crystal-clear understanding. The lawyer, Mr. Hoffman from Hoffman & Associates, kept talking about tax implications and transfer procedures, but his words became white noise. All I could hear was my own heartbeat, steady and calm, like the tick of a grandfather clock counting down to something inevitable. Brandon wasn't even there. Of course he wasn't. He was probably in his apartment in Lincoln Park, the one Mom and Dad had helped him buy, playing video games or planning his next European vacation. He'd always been too busy living his charmed life to deal with the messy realities of death and paperwork. The irony wasn't lost on me. For the past 5 years, ever since Dad's first heart attack, I'd been the one managing their finances. Every month, like clockwork, I transferred money from my account to theirs. The mortgage on their Naperville house, $2,800 a month. The utilities, another $300. Dad's heart medication that insurance wouldn't fully cover, $450. Mom's physical therapy after her hip replacement, $200 weekly. I was their safety net, their invisible lifeline, the daughter who showed up when creditors called and who never asked questions when they needed help. But sitting in that lawyer's office, staring at the legal document that reduced my entire relationship with my parents to 2 words, nothing allocated, I finally understood my place in their world. That night, back in my studio apartment in Wicker Park, I opened my laptop and logged into my Chase account. Line after line of automated payments stared back at me, each one a thread in the web of dependency I'd woven around my parents' lives. 4 years, I'd been their financial guardian angel, working double shifts at Northwestern Memorial Hospital as a nurse practitioner, sacrificing my own dreams of home ownership and travel to keep their comfortable suburban lifestyle intact. My parents never asked Brandon for help. Why would they? He was their golden boy, their pride and joy, the nephew they'd raised after his parents died in a car accident when he was 12. To them, Brandon was investment grade, someone whose potential couldn't be wasted on mundane responsibilities like paying bills. I was the workhorse, reliable and uncomplaining, the one who could be counted on to handle the unglamorous necessities. I clicked cancel autopay on every single transfer. One by one, I severed the financial umbilical cord that had kept them afloat for half a decade. They used to call him their golden boy. I was the afterthought, the backup plan, the insurance policy they never thought they'd need to cash in. At family gatherings, Christmas at their house, 4th of July barbecues in their backyard, Brandon's birthday parties, the difference in treatment was stark enough to cut glass. When Brandon walked into a room, their faces transformed. Mom would actually stand up, smoothing her blouse, her voice lifting with genuine joy. "Brandon, how was your week? Tell us everything." Dad would mute the Bears game, something he never did for anyone, and lean forward with the kind of attention I'd craved my entire life. For Brandon's 25th birthday, they'd thrown a party at Gibson's Steakhouse downtown. 50 guests, champagne toasts, a cake that probably cost more than my monthly rent. When he unwrapped their gift, a check for $10,000 to help with your graphic design business, the room erupted in applause. Brandon had grinned, pocketed the check, and within a month had blown it on a trip to Bali with his girlfriend. My 30th birthday had been dinner at Olive Garden. Just the 3 of us. Dad had muttered, "Good job on another year," like a manager conducting a routine performance review. The gift was a $50 Target gift card. The pattern had been consistent for 20 years. Brandon graduated from DePaul with a communications degree. They threw him a graduation party at the Chicago Yacht Club. I graduated from Rush University with my master's in nursing. Dad nodded approvingly over his morning coffee and said, "That's practical." When Brandon decided to start his graphic design business, they fronted him $15,000 for equipment and office space. When I wanted to pursue my dream of becoming a pediatric nurse practitioner, requiring additional certification and training, I was told that was nice, but expensive, and that I should be grateful for my steady job. The worst part wasn't the inequality, it was the expectation that I'd be grateful for the scraps. Every Christmas, Mom would pull me aside and say, "We're so proud of how responsible you've become." Brandon's more of the creative type. you know? He needs more support. As if my reliability was a character flaw, something that disqualified me from deserving the same investment they made in his potential. I learned to live with it. To be the dependable one, the shadow in the corner, the daughter who handled emergencies while the son handled dreams. I told myself it was temporary, that eventually my consistency would be recognized and rewarded. But that will, those two words, nothing allocated, revealed the truth I'd been avoiding. I wasn't their daughter. I was their employee. And employees, no matter how loyal or essential, are expendable. The evening after cancelling the auto payments, I sat on my fire escape overlooking the city lights, drinking a glass of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. It felt like the perfect time to celebrate, not a victory, but a liberation. For the first time in years, my money was truly mine. The first text came exactly 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning while I was grabbing coffee at the Starbucks near the hospital before my shift. Ashley, transfer the mortgage payment today. It's due Thursday. Mom. No greeting. No how are you. No acknowledgement that we hadn't spoken since the will reading. Just expectation, delivered with a casual entitlement of someone who'd never questioned whether their ATM might one day stop dispensing cash. I stared at my phone screen for a long time, watching other customers order their lattes and rush off to jobs and lives that suddenly seemed simpler than mine. The barista called my name twice before I heard her. Back home, I sat at my kitchen table with the phone in front of me, crafting and deleting responses for 20 minutes. Part of me wanted to write an essay, to explain the betrayal and hurt, to make them understand what they'd done. Another part wanted to unleash years of suppressed resentment in a carefully crafted paragraph of fury. Instead, I typed 7 words, ask your real son for help. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The silence that followed was delicious. For 3 days, nothing. No angry calls, no guilt-trip voicemails, no follow-up texts demanding explanations. I began to wonder if they were actually asking Brandon for the money, if my rebellion had simply shifted the burden to where it belonged. Then, on Friday evening, my phone rang. Ashley Marie Patterson, what is wrong with you? Mom's voice was sharp with panic, higher pitched than I'd heard it in years. Don't be childish. We raised you. You owe us. I almost laughed. Raised me? They'd housed me, fed me, sent me to decent schools, the bare minimum required by law and social expectation. But raised me? That implied nurturing, guidance, emotional investment. What they'd done was manage me, the way you'd manage any reliable asset. I read the will, Mom, I said, surprised by how calm my own voice sounded. It was clear enough. That's different. That's about inheritance, not about. Click. I hung up and immediately turned off my phone. For the first time in my adult life, I went to sleep without being available for their emergencies, their last-minute financial panics, their middle-of-the-night calls about Dad's chest pain or Mom's inability to figure out the new Medicare forms. The next morning, I had 17 missed calls and 8 voicemails. I deleted them all without listening. At work that day, my colleague Janet noticed my mood. You seem different today. Lighter, somehow. She was right. For 32 years, I'd carried the invisible weight of being perpetually on call, perpetually responsible for problems I hadn't created. That weight was gone, and in its absence, I felt like I could breathe properly for the first time in decades. The unraveling began exactly as I'd predicted it would, slowly, then all at once. Without my monthly transfers, their carefully maintained suburban lifestyle started to crack. The mortgage payment bounced. ComEd sent a disconnection notice. The landscaping service that had kept their Naperville yard pristine for 15 years submitted an unpaid balance to collections. I knew all this because I checked. Every Friday evening, after my shift at the hospital, I'd pour myself a glass of wine and log into the Cook County Public Records database. Their names began appearing with increasing frequency, first in civil court filings, then in foreclosure proceedings, finally in the auction listings that ran in the suburban papers. It was fascinating, watching their world dismantle itself piece by piece. The house they'd bought in 1985 for $180,000 was now worth nearly $500,000, but it was also mortgaged to the hilt. Apparently, they'd been using home equity loans to fund Brandon's various ventures, his failed food truck business, his attempt at becoming a freelance photographer, his current graphic design company that existed mainly on Instagram. 6 weeks after I'd stopped the payments, I received another text from Mom. We're being harassed by creditors. Transfer something. Just this once. This time, I didn't respond immediately. I waited until midnight, when I knew they'd both be lying awake, staring at the ceiling, calculating how many days they had left before the bank seized their house, then sent a single line. You should call your heir. The calls grew frantic after that. I didn't block their numbers, but I didn't answer either. I let every voicemail accumulate, each one a small chapter in their slow-motion catastrophe. Mom's voice grew increasingly shrill. You ungrateful child. After all we did for you. Do you want us homeless? Each accusation confirmed what I'd suspected. They genuinely couldn't understand why their reliable daughter had suddenly become unreliable. In their minds, I was malfunctioning, like a car that had always started but now refused to turn over. Dad's voicemails were different, more bewildered than angry. Ashley, I don't understand what's happening here. We're family. Family helps family. But were we family? Or were we just people who shared DNA and a complicated financial arrangement? The most revealing message came from Mom on a Wednesday night. Fine, be stubborn. But when we lose everything, it's on you. Brandon doesn't have this kind of money. He's an artist. You're the one with the steady job, the one who's always been good with money. This is what you're for. This is what you're for. Not this is what family does, or this is how we support each other. This is what you're for. As if I were a tool designed for a specific purpose, and my refusal to function was a betrayal of my essential nature. I saved that voicemail. Sometimes, when doubt crept in during quiet moments, I'd play it back to remind myself that I wasn't abandoning family. I was escaping a job I'd never applied for and never wanted. The final act arrived on a grey Tuesday morning in late October. I was in my kitchen, making coffee and listening to NPR, when my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. This time, her tone had shifted completely. Ashley, we shouldn't have done the will that way. We were thinking about taxes and estate planning, but we didn't consider your feelings. We'll talk to the lawyer about changing it. Just please send the mortgage payment. The bank scheduled the foreclosure for next month. Too late. I typed my reply slowly, each word deliberate, each keystroke a blade. You made your choice when you thought I'd never find out about it. Now live with your son or die with him. The brutality of my own words surprised me. I'd never spoken to my parents, to anyone, with such calculated cruelty. But sitting there in my quiet kitchen, watching the steam rise from my coffee mug, I felt no urge to soften the message or add an apology. They'd had 32 years to see me as something more than their emergency fund. They'd chosen not to. 2 hours later, my phone rang. Brandon's name appeared on the screen, the first time he'd called me in over a year. Ashley. His voice cracked slightly, stripped of its usual casual confidence. Why aren't you helping them? You know I don't have that kind of money. For the first time since this began, I let the rage surface. Not loud or theatrical, but steady and lethal. They called you their son, I said quietly. Their pride and joy. Their everything. They gave you the inheritance, Brandon. Every penny of it. Time to earn it. But Ashley, that's not, that money isn't liquid, it's tied up in. Sell something, I interrupted. Get a loan. Ask your girlfriend's family. Figure it out. Isn't that what golden boys do? Figure things out. You're being insane, he said, his voice rising. They raised us both. They love us both. This isn't about. They raised you, I corrected. They employed me. There's a difference. He started to protest, but I ended the call. Clean. Final. The next day, I drove past their house for the first time in months. There was a foreclosure notice taped to the front door, and their pristine lawn was already showing signs of neglect. Dad's prized rose garden, the one he'd spent every weekend tending for 20 years, was overgrown with weeds. I didn't feel sorry for them. I felt free. I didn't go to the foreclosure auction, but I tracked it online. The house sold for $420,000 to a young couple from the city looking for suburban space. In the comments section of the real estate website, someone had posted, "Great bones, need some TLC, but perfect for a growing family." My parents moved into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in Schaumburg that Brandon found for them. According to the public records, he was paying $1,800 a month in rent, more than he'd ever contributed to their household expenses, but still less than half of what I'd been sending them monthly for 5 years. The golden boy who'd never been asked to sacrifice anything was finally learning what it meant to carry weight. And from what I could gather through social media, his Instagram posts had become noticeably less frequent and considerably less glamorous. The burden wasn't sitting well with him. 3 months after the foreclosure, I ran into Mrs. Chen from their old neighborhood at Whole Foods. She recognized me immediately. "Ashley, how are your parents adjusting to the move? Brandon seems like such a good son, taking care of them like this." I smiled politely. "He's certainly stepping up." "It must be such a relief for you," she continued, "having him handle everything now. I always worried you were carrying too much responsibility." The irony was perfect. All those years, their neighbors had seen exactly what was happening: the daughter constantly running errands, handling crises, managing the invisible infrastructure of their lives, but had interpreted it as my choice rather than my assignment. "Yes," I said, loading organic vegetables into my cart. "It's wonderful having someone else handle the responsibility for once." That evening, I got a call from Brandon. His voice sounded exhausted. "Ashley, I can't keep doing this. The rent, Mom's medications, Dad's doctor visits, it's destroying my finances. And they're not easy to live with. Mom criticizes everything I do, and Dad keeps asking when you're going to come to your senses." "Sounds tough," I said, not offering any solutions. "Look, I know you're angry about the will, but couldn't we work something out? Maybe split the costs? I could give you half the inheritance when they die." I finished the sentence he was too uncomfortable to complete. "You want to negotiate my parents' end-of-life care based on their eventual estate?" "That's not what I meant." "It's exactly what you meant, Brandon. And it's exactly the kind of thinking that got us here." I hung up and blocked his number. A year has passed since I read that will, and people still ask if I feel guilty about abandoning my parents. The question always surprises me because it assumes I had a choice in the original arrangement, as if I'd voluntarily signed up to be their financial backup plan and was now violating some sacred contract. The truth is simpler: I feel lighter than I have in decades. My savings account, once perpetually drained by their emergencies, now has enough money for the down payment on a condo in Lincoln Park. I've started taking weekend trips, nothing elaborate, just drives to Wisconsin or Michigan, but they're mine. My time, my money, my choice. Last month, I got a promotion to head nurse practitioner in pediatric care. The job comes with better hours and a significant raise, but more importantly, it's the position I've wanted since graduate school. 4 years, I couldn't pursue opportunities that might interfere with my availability as their emergency contact. Now, my career belongs to me again. I still see them occasionally, at family funerals or community events we can't avoid. They look older, more fragile, diminished in ways that go beyond the normal aging process. Dad's heart condition has worsened without his expensive medications. Mom's arthritis flares up more frequently in their smaller apartment. They don't try to guilt me anymore. I think they finally understood that their reliable daughter was never as dependable as they believed. I was just afraid of disappointing them. Once that fear disappeared, so did their power over me. Brandon looks exhausted whenever I see him. The golden boy who'd never been asked to sacrifice anything is discovering what it means to be indispensable to people who need constant care. He's learned, probably too late, that being someone's favorite is very different from being their foundation. Sometimes I wonder if they regret the will, if they wish they divided things differently. But regret requires acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and I don't think they're capable of seeing their actions as wrong. In their minds, they were simply being practical, leaving their estate to the child who couldn't be counted on to earn his own way, while relying on the child who'd always been self-sufficient. They never understood that my self-sufficiency was learned, not innate, developed out of necessity rather than preference. They never considered that their dependable daughter might one day decide to depend only on herself. People think revenge is fire, loud, dramatic, destructive. But real revenge is ice. It's patient and calculated and precise. It's not about hurting people. It's about letting them experience the natural consequences of their choices without your intervention. I didn't scream when I read that will. I didn't beg or plead or fight. I just stopped paying their bills and watched their carefully constructed world collapse under its own unsustainable weight. Now, when I look back on those years of silent sacrifice, I don't feel anger or regret. I feel clarity. All those years, I was the daughter who kept the lights on, who paid the bills, who carried the weight they were afraid to give their precious son. But in the end, They chose Brandon. So I chose myself. And I have never slept better.